our reverse angle camera. He's looking deep, but he knows he's in trouble. Lawrence Taylor, number 56, right there. Carson is number 53. But it's Taylor over Carson.
In 1985, Lawrence Taylor ended Joe Theismann's career with a brutal hit. Now, 3 decades later, Joe still hasn't let it go. A new video shows him threatening Taylor, but that is not all. In the same clip, he also reveals fresh details about that night. Let's break it down. The night that changed everything. Picture this. It's November 18, 1985, and America is settling in for another Monday night football spectacle. The Washington Redskins are hosting the New York Giants at RFK Stadium, with over 55,000 fans packed into the seats and millions more watching from their living rooms. The stadium lights are blazing, and nobody, absolutely nobody, could have predicted that they were about to witness one of the most gruesome and career-altering moments in NFL history. The Redskins were struggling that season, sitting at a disappointing 4-5 record, while the Giants were building something special under head coach Bill Parcells. But this wasn't just any game between division rivals. This was a collision course between destiny and disaster, between two men whose lives would become forever intertwined by a single, devastating play. On one side of the field stood Joe Theismann, the 36-year-old quarterback who had become the face of the Washington franchise. Theismann wasn't just any quarterback. He was a showman, a performer who lived and breathed the spotlight. They called him King Quote because of his magnetic personality with the media, his ability to command attention both on and off the field. He had already thrown for over 25,000 yards in his NFL career, won 2 Super Bowls, and earned 2 Pro Bowl selections. But perhaps more importantly, he carried himself with the confidence of a man who believed he was invincible, untouchable by the brutal realities that awaited lesser mortals in the NFL. On the other side was Lawrence Taylor, simply known as LT, to those who dared to speak his name in hushed, reverent tones. Taylor wasn't just a linebacker, he was a force of nature, a 240-pound missile who had revolutionized the defensive side of football. Already considered arguably the greatest defensive player ever, Taylor possessed a rare combination of speed, strength, and football intelligence that made offensive coordinators wake up in cold sweats. As the second quarter unfolded, with the Giants leading 7-3, the Redskins found themselves backed up to their own 44-yard line. It was the kind of situation that called for creativity, for something unexpected to shift momentum back in their favor. Enter the flea flicker, a play that sounds innocent enough, but requires perfect timing, precise execution, and just a little bit of luck to succeed. The play design seemed straightforward on paper. Theismann would hand off to fullback John Riggins, who would pitch the ball back to the quarterback, allowing Theismann to drop back and find an open receiver downfield. It was the kind of play that could catch a defense off guard, the kind of gamble that could turn a struggling drive into a game-changing touchdown. But there was a problem, a massive game-changing problem that would prove catastrophic for the Redskins. Pro Bowl left tackle Joe Jacoby was sidelined with a knee injury, leaving backup Russ Grimm and tight end Don Warren to try and contain the most dominant pass rusher in football. It was like trying to stop a freight train with a paper wall. Meanwhile, on the Giants sideline, a young defensive coordinator named Bill Belichick, yes, that Bill Belichick, had done his homework. He had prepared his defense for exactly this type of play, studying film and identifying the Redskins' tendencies. As the play unfolded, it was as if Belichick had written the script himself. The snap came, and for a brief moment, everything proceeded according to plan. Theismann executed the handoff to Riggins with the precision that had made him one of the league's most reliable quarterbacks. Riggins took the ball and immediately pitched it back, just as they had practiced countless times in training camp. But as Theismann dropped back to survey his options, the pocket began to collapse around him like a house of cards in a hurricane. Lawrence Taylor and Harry Carson, 2 of the most feared linebackers in the game, converged on Theismann with the intensity of heat-seeking missiles. The quarterback, unable to find an open receiver amid the chaos of the Giants' perfectly executed blitz, found himself trapped between 2 worlds, the world of the living and the world of the catastrophically injured. What happened next would be replayed on television screens across America for decades to come, becoming one of those moments that defines not just a career, but an entire era of football. Taylor, coming from behind, grabbed Theismann's shoulders and swung his 240-pound frame under the quarterback. In that split second, physics took over, and the laws of momentum and force conspired to create a perfect storm of destruction. Taylor's knee drove into Theismann's lower right leg with the force of a sledgehammer meeting glass. The result was a comminuted compound fracture of both the tibia and fibula, medical terminology that fails to capture the sheer horror of what 55,000 people witnessed in person and 30 million more saw on their television screens. The The audible pop-pop sound echoed through the stadium and across the broadcast, a sickening crack that seemed to silence the entire world. The tibia had not just broken, it had shattered and pierced through the skin, creating a wound so gruesome that even seasoned NFL veterans turned away in horror. In the broadcast booth, three men who had seen everything the NFL had to offer, Frank Gifford, O.J. Simpson, and Joe Namath, found themselves speechless. The crowd of 55,000 fell silent, as if the entire stadium had suddenly been placed under a spell of disbelief and shock. But perhaps the most telling reaction came from the man who had delivered the devastating blow, Lawrence Taylor. The intimidating force who had struck fear into the hearts of quarterbacks across the league immediately waved frantically for medical help. He would later describe his own appearance in that moment as looking like a crazed dog, captured forever on NFL Film's mic'd up footage. The sight of Taylor, this seemingly invincible warrior, showing genuine distress and concern for his fallen opponent, revealed something profound about the nature of professional football. Beneath all the trash talk, the intimidation, and the controlled violence, these were human beings who understood that they were engaged in a sport where careers could end in the blink of an eye. As Theismann lay on the field, he would later recall hearing what sounded like two muffled gunshots and feeling no pain initially due to shock. It was a blessing and a curse. The absence of immediate pain allowed him to remain conscious and coherent, but it also meant he was fully aware of the gravity of what had just occurred. As he was being stretchered off the field, screaming in pain, Theismann mistook Taylor for Carson and managed to say, "It was a hell of a play." Even in his moment of anguish, the competitor in him recognized the excellence of the defensive execution that had ended his career. The injury would force Theismann into immediate retirement at age 36, cutting short a career that had seemed destined for several more productive seasons. That night at Arlington Hospital, surgery stabilized the leg, but poor bone growth would leave Theismann's right leg approximately 1 inch shorter than his left, causing a permanent limp that served as a daily reminder of that horrific Monday night. But this story, this incredible tale of football, fate, and forgiveness, was just beginning. Because what happened in the immediate aftermath of that injury, and what would unfold over the next 3 decades? The immediate aftermath and the birth of an unlikely bond. The morning of November 19, 1985, dawned gray and cold in the greater New York area, much like the hearts of football fans who had witnessed the previous night's horrific events. While Joe Theismann lay in his hospital bed at Arlington Hospital, his right leg encased in a complex web of pins, screws, and surgical hardware, Lawrence Taylor was trying to process what had happened during what should have been a routine practice session with the New York Giants. The image that would haunt Taylor for years to come wasn't the sound of the breaking bones or the sight of the compound fracture. It was the look of genuine terror and pain in Theismann's eyes as he realized his career had just ended in the most brutal fashion imaginable. Taylor would later describe himself as devastated, admitting that he had never seen such a catastrophic injury and had genuinely feared he might have killed Theismann. But what happened next would begin to define the character of both men and set the stage for one of the most remarkable relationships in NFL history. The next morning, Taylor called Theismann from Giants practice. The conversation, as Theismann would recount it decades later, was both touching and typically Taylor in its blunt honesty. To understand the significance of this phone call, we need to understand Taylor's personality. This intensity wasn't just reserved for the football field, it defined how Taylor approached every aspect of his life, including his relationships with other players. "Joe, how you doing?" Taylor asked, his voice carrying a weight that teammates said they had never heard before. "Not very well. You broke both bones in my leg," Theismann replied, still groggy from pain medication but maintaining his characteristic wit even in the face of career-ending adversity. Taylor's response was pure LT. "I don't do things halfway, gotta go to practice." Years later, we can see how this direct, no-nonsense approach became part of their shared humor.
I want to make it perfectly clear. You're never gonna get to 10. You're not even gonna get 5. You can stop it.
Taylor's blunt dismissal of Theismann's mock demand for a percentage of the insurance money shows how his directness became a source of comedy rather than conflict. Taylor didn't stop at just a phone call. He visited Theismann in the hospital, an act that both men would later describe as a pivotal moment in what would become an enduring friendship. Here was the most feared pass rusher in football, sitting beside the hospital bed of a man whose career he had just ended, not with arrogance or indifference, but with genuine concern and compassion. The visit revealed something profound about both men. Taylor, for all his intimidating presence on the field, possessed a deep well of empathy that few people ever got to see. He understood that football was a game, but the men who played it were human beings with families, dreams, and fears. Theismann, meanwhile, showed a grace and maturity that went far beyond beyond his reputation as a flashy, attention-seeking quarterback. We can see evidence of Theismann's enduring good nature even decades later. His warm recollection of playing against the Giants shows how he genuinely loved the competition, even with the team whose player ended his career. This wasn't the first time Theismann had faced a serious leg injury. The same leg had been broken during his time in the Canadian Football League in 1975, but he had recovered fully from that injury. This time would be different. The 1975 injury had been a setback. The 1985 injury was a career ender. Yet somehow, the gravity of this second, more devastating injury seemed to bring out the best in both men rather than the worst. Theismann's admission that he had originally wanted to play for the Giants adds another layer of irony to their story. He had wanted to be teammates with the organization that employed the man who would end his career. The contrast between the two injuries was stark and telling. In 1975, Theismann was a young, hungry quarterback still fighting to establish himself in professional football. The injury was an obstacle to overcome, a challenge to conquer. In 1985, he was a veteran quarterback at the end of his prime, and the injury represented not just the end of his career, but the end of an entire chapter of his life. Yet his response to Taylor showed a wisdom and perspective that perhaps only comes with age and experience. From the very beginning, Theismann made it clear that he held no grudge against Taylor. He was doing his job, part of the game. This wasn't just public relations spin or an attempt to appear magnanimous in the face of tragedy. It was a genuine acknowledgement that both men understood the violent nature of the sport they had chosen to play at the highest level. Taylor's blunt dismissal of Theismann's prediction about the Redskins shows how their relationship had evolved to the point where they could engage in the kind of direct disagreement that only happens between people who are completely comfortable with each other. For Theismann, the transition from active player to former player was both sudden and jarring. One moment, he was the starting quarterback for one of the NFL's most storied franchises, and the next, he was learning to walk again with a permanent limp and a right leg that would forever be an inch shorter than his left. The physical challenges were immense, but the psychological adjustment was perhaps even more daunting. But rather than wallowing in self-pity or bitterness, he began to see opportunity in adversity. The injury forced him to develop new skills, new perspectives, and new ways of contributing to the sport he loved. It was a painful form of growth, but growth nonetheless. Taylor, meanwhile, continued his Hall of Fame career, going on to win 2 more Super Bowls and earning the 1986 NFL MVP award, a rare honor for a defensive player. But the injury to Theismann remained with him throughout his career, serving as a constant reminder of the fine line between making a great play and ending someone's career. The relationship between the two men continued to evolve in the years immediately following the injury. Taylor attended Theismann's 1986 Notre Dame Hall of Fame induction, a gesture that spoke volumes about the respect that had developed between them. Here was the man who had ended Theismann's career, now celebrating his achievements and honoring his contributions to the game.
Well, you can tell right here, just like that Monday Night Football game, the friendships and the memories never end.
The interviewer's observation about their enduring friendship perfectly captures what had developed between these two men over the decades since that traumatic night. The seeds of forgiveness had been planted in a hospital room conversation and nurtured through acts of compassion and mutual respect. But the true test of their bond would come later, as both men navigated the complexities of life after football and discovered that some connections transcend the game that brought them together. The reunion, 30 years later, and the power of time. Time has a funny way of healing wounds and transforming relationships in ways that seem impossible in the immediate aftermath of traumatic events. As the calendar pages turn from 1985 toward 2015, approaching the 30-year anniversary of one of football's most infamous injuries, something remarkable was happening between Joe Theismann and Lawrence Taylor. They were becoming genuine friends. The transformation wasn't immediate, nor was it forced. Instead, it was the natural evolution of two men who had shared one of the most intense and life-altering moments possible in professional sports, and who had chosen to handle it with grace, respect, and an understanding that transcended the brutal circumstances of their connection. By 2015, around the 30-year anniversary of the injury, Theismann had begun to speak about the incident as a blessing. This wasn't the bitter sarcasm of a man trying to convince himself that his misfortune was actually good luck. It was the genuine reflection of someone who had come to understand how that traumatic moment had opened doors that might otherwise have remained closed. The injury had ended his playing career, yes, but it had also launched him into a successful broadcasting career that allowed him to remain close to the game he loved while building a new identity beyond that of NFL quarterback. He told NJ.com that the injury was a blessing because it ended what was becoming a declining career. He had actually been benched earlier in 1985 and opened up new opportunities in broadcasting. This perspective shift represented years of personal growth and reflection. Theismann had spent the better part of 2 decades processing not just the physical trauma of the injury, but the psychological and emotional impact of having his identity identity fundamentally altered in a single moment. The ability to reframe that experience as a blessing rather than a curse spoke to a level of emotional maturity and spiritual growth that was genuinely inspiring. Meanwhile, Taylor's perspective on the injury had evolved as well. In a 2015 Washingtonian oral history piece, both men reflected on the incident, Taylor on his lingering guilt and Theismann on his complete lack of anger toward the man who had ended his career. The honesty and vulnerability both men showed in discussing the injury revealed how much their relationship had matured over the decades. Taylor's admission of guilt was particularly significant because it showed a side of the legendary linebacker that the public rarely saw. This was a man who had built his reputation on being fearless, relentless, and emotionally impenetrable on the football field. Yet 30 years later, he was willing to admit publicly that he still carried some emotional weight from an injury that, by all accounts, was a completely legal and unavoidable result of playing professional football. But the real revelation of how far their relationship had come would occur in 2016 during a series of public appearances and interviews that showcased not just their mutual respect, but their genuine friendship and ability to find humor in what had once been such a traumatic experience. The stage was set at a Charlotte Touchdown Club event where Taylor was speaking to a crowd of football enthusiasts. In typical LT fashion, he decided to address the elephant in the room with his characteristic blend of honesty and humor. Taylor joked that he did Theismann a favor by ending his career, claiming that Theismann was screaming like a little girl after the injury. He even mentioned that Theismann had cashed a $3 million Lloyd's insurance check as a result of the injury. The insurance detail added an interesting dimension to their story that many people weren't aware of. Theismann had taken out a Lloyd's of London insurance policy on his career, a prescient move that provided some financial cushion when his playing days ended so abruptly. Taylor's joking reference to this showed how thoroughly the two men had discussed their shared experience, including details that went far beyond what most people knew about the aftermath of the injury. In an earlier era, such comments might have reignited old wounds or created new conflicts, but Theismann's response revealed just how much their relationship had evolved. Rather than taking offense, Theismann responded lightheartedly to USA Today, calling Taylor's comments just joking and praising Taylor's post-injury empathy, noting how Taylor had visited him in the hospital and shown genuine compassion. But the most remarkable evidence of their evolved relationship came in the form of a reunion that was captured on video and shared with the world. The reunion, filmed for the NFL Draft Bible, provided an intimate look at how two men who had been forever linked by one of football's most brutal moments had transformed that connection into something beautiful.
Hey Joe, how are you, man?
Guys, okay.
Nice to see you. I'm Mike with NFL DraftBible.com. I got my boy there. Can I just say hi to you real fast? You ready to come out and sign for the fans today?
Absolutely, but you know what else too is you'll notice I won't let Lawrence on my left side. Hey, I learned my lesson.
The playful banter immediately established the tone of their relationship. Theismann's joke about not letting Taylor on his left side, a reference to the blindside sack that ended his career, was delivered with the timing of a seasoned comedian, and both men laughed genuinely at the reference to their shared history.
I can't believe you know who's back in the house.
First of all, let me tell you something. I did this guy a favor by
Listen, Miami Mike's listening.
Taylor's continuation of his favor theme from the Charlotte event showed that this had become a running joke between them, the kind of good-natured ribbing that only exists between genuine friends who are completely comfortable with their shared history. The insurance money joke revealed another layer of their relationship. Taylor's mock demand for a percentage of the insurance payout showed how they had found a way to find humor in what had once been a source of pain and controversy. The reference to golf was particularly significant because it revealed that their relationship had moved beyond just public appearances and interviews. They were actually spending recreational time together, bonding over a sport that was far less violent than the one that had brought them together. Theismann would later confirm to USA Today that they play golf now, cementing the image of these two former adversaries as genuine friends. The golf connection represented something deeper than just two celebrities playing around together. Golf requires patience, conversation, and extended time in each other's company, qualities that suggest a genuine friendship rather than just mutual respect between former opponents. In Taylor's 2016 book excerpt published by ESPN, he referred to Theismann as a friend, writing, "No animosity, I know his son well." This casual mention of knowing Theismann's family revealed the depth of their connection. They had moved beyond being just former opponents who respected each other to being genuine friends whose families knew each other. The 2016 reunion also demonstrated something important about the nature of forgiveness and healing. Both men had come to understand that the injury, while traumatic and career-ending, was ultimately just part of the game they both loved. Theismann has repeatedly stated over the years that he never blamed Taylor, describing the hit as part of the game. and their public interactions consistently reinforce this message. As recently as 2024, Theismann spoke in an interview with the Oklahoman about still golfing with Taylor, confirming that their friendship has endured well beyond the 30-year anniversary period. Their relationship has become a testament to the power of forgiveness, the healing nature of time, and the possibility of finding genuine connection in the aftermath of trauma. What makes their story so remarkable is not just that they moved past the injury, but that they transformed it into something positive, a foundation for friendship, humor, and mutual respect. Theismann's perspective has shifted to viewing the injury through a different lens on life, focusing on family, broadcasting, and relationships like his friendship with Taylor. Their reunion 30 years later serves as a powerful reminder that some of life's most meaningful relationships can emerge from its most challenging moments. Two men who were connected by one of football's most brutal injuries discovered that their connection could evolve into something beautiful, lasting, and deeply human. Thanks for watching. Check out other cards on the screen.